You can buy a $20,000 outboard motor for the price of a down payment on a used old car. A real Yamaha or Mercury, 2 or 3 years old, physically attached to a boat that just got totaled by an insurance company, sitting in a storage lot right now waiting for someone who knows what they are looking at. And the reason it sells for $3,000 has nothing to do with what is wrong with the motor. It has everything to do with how insurance companies make decisions, and why those decisions almost always work in your favor if you understand this one thing. So the first question is the obvious one. How does a $20,000 outboard end up in a salvage lot with a $3,000 price tag on it? When a boat takes damage, a hurricane, a dock collision, a flooding event, the insurance company sends an adjuster to assess the total loss. In most states, the threshold is around 80%. If the estimated repair cost exceeds 80% of the boat's insured value, the insurer declares the whole vessel a constructive total loss and writes a check to the owner. The boat, the motor, the trailer, all of it, gets transferred to a liquidator and sold at auction. And here's the critical piece. That decision is made on the boat, not the motor separately. The motor has no threshold of its own. So when a 3-year-old fiberglass center console with a new Yamaha F250 takes a dock hit that crushes the bow, the adjuster looks at $60,000 in hull and rigging repair on a boat insured for $80,000, decides it crosses the threshold, and writes off the whole package. The motor may have 0 damage, 0 hours of additional wear. It still goes to the lot with the hull. But before we get into where those lots are and how to access them, there is something about outboard motors specifically that changes the entire math of this. If you skip this part, you will either pay too much or walk away from an engine that needed a flush and an oil change. When an insurance company totals a boat after saltwater flooding or storm surge, the adjuster cannot easily determine how deeply the outboard was affected. An outboard that sat submerged in salt water for 6 hours looks exactly the same externally as one that sat submerged for 6 minutes. An adjuster working through hundreds of post-storm claims does not have time to pull the cowl, run a compression test, and evaluate every cylinder. So what happens in practice, as documented repeatedly in marine forums and by experienced adjusters themselves, is that insurance companies tend to total the whole package because it is faster, cleaner, and it removes the liability of approving repairs on a motor that might fail 6 months later. This is the loophole. The insurer is not writing off the motor because it is ruined. They are writing it off because the paperwork is easier. Now you understand why the price gap exists. So the next question is where these motors actually are and which of the 3 channels lets you find them before anyone else. The most visible channel is Copart. Copart is the largest vehicle salvage auction company in the United States and runs a marine section with typically over 100 salvage boats listed at any given time, motors included. After a major hurricane, like Ian in 2022 or Helene in 2024, that inventory spikes into the thousands. You do not need a dealer license to bid in most states. You register, pay a membership fee, and you have full access to browse photos, damage descriptions, and VIN history on every listing. The platform is searchable by state, by engine type, and by damage category. Copart is where most of the volume goes after major weather events. The second channel is Gov Deals, which handles government and municipal surplus, including boats seized from abandoned slip situations and vessels transferred from state agencies. This inventory gets far less attention than Copart's because it requires knowing where to look. Gov Deals does not market aggressively, but the pricing reflects that. Boats on Gov Deals with working motors routinely sell under their Copart equivalents because the buyer pool is a fraction of the size. There is also a third channel almost nobody uses, and it produces the least competitive buying environment of all 3. It is the buyback. When an insurance company totals your boat, they give you the option to buy it back from them before it goes to the liquidator. Most owners do not do this because they just want the cash. But a third party can often negotiate directly with the insurer's total loss department before the boat reaches the auction platform, sometimes at a price that never gets set by competitive bidding at all. It requires persistence and knowing who to call, but the buyers who use this channel regularly describe it as the quietest, most consistent source of undervalued motors in the entire market. If this is already changing how you think about your next engine, hit subscribe. And if you have ever walked past a storm-damaged boat and had no idea what you were actually looking at, tell me about it in the comments. Those stories almost always end up in a future video, so now you know the three channels and why the price gap exists. But here is where most buyers make the mistake that costs them everything. It is not a mistake about the price. It is a mistake about which motors are actually worth buying. The question you need answered before you bid on anything is this: was the motor submerged in salt water, and for how long? A modern 4-stroke outboard like a Yamaha F200 or a Mercury 150 4-stroke is a precision-assembled machine with fuel injectors, an ECU, an alternator, and a cooling system that runs on raw water pulled directly from the water around it. When that system gets flooded with salt water from the outside, storm surge forcing water up through the exhaust, a capsizing event, or a sinking at the dock, the damage depends almost entirely on three things: whether the engine was running at the time, whether it is a 4-stroke or 2-stroke, and how quickly someone flushed it after recovery. An outboard that ingested salt water while running is almost certainly destroyed. Hydrolocking, water entering the cylinders while the pistons are moving, bends connecting rods and shatters internal components in a fraction of a second. That engine needs a full powerhead rebuild at $3,500 to $7,500, or replacement outright. A new Yamaha F250 installs in Miami at $22,000 to $26,000. A new Mercury 150 sits around $14,500 installed, so a rebuild that runs more than 60% of a used replacement engine price means you replace, not rebuild. If that just changed how you look at every outboard sitting on a salvage lot, the like button is how you tell the algorithm this breakdown is worth showing to someone else. But here's the other side, and this is the side the opportunity lives on. An outboard that was submerged while not running, that got out of the water quickly, and that was flushed with fresh water and fogging oil within hours of recovery, may need nothing more than a full service, fresh fluids, and a powerhead inspection. A standard 4-stroke saltwater flush and service runs $450 to $700 at a marine shop. That is the entire difference between a $3,000 engine that becomes a $20,000 engine and a $3,000 engine that becomes a $6,000 paperweight. The way you find out which one you are looking at is not by trusting the damage description on the auction listing. It is by running a compression test before you bid. Every cylinder on a healthy 4-stroke outboard should come back within 10% of the others. A cylinder with a dramatically lower reading has either hydrolocked rusted internally from standing salt water or developed a valve problem from the submersion. That compression test costs $150 to $250 at a marine shop. It tells you in 30 minutes whether the engine is a service job or a parts donor. Now you have the formula. There is one more thing most people skip, and it turns a smart buy into a legal headache that follows the motor for years. Outboard motors in most states carry their own registration or serial number that ties to a title separate from the hull. When an insurance company totals a boat and sells the package at auction, the title to the motor transfers with the sale, but it may or may not carry a salvage brand depending on which state the boat was registered in. Florida, for instance, does not brand boat titles the way most states brand car titles. A motor that came out of a Florida insurance total loss can often be re-registered with a clean record. A motor from a state that does brand titles may carry that history forward and affect your ability to resell it or insure it later. Check the state of registration before you bid, not after. A motor with a clean transferable registration is worth meaningfully more than the same motor with a branded history, even if both run identically. The people who consistently win at this run compression tests before they bid. They check the registration state and title status on every listing. They budget the service cost into the offer price, not as a surprise afterward. And they walk away from anything where the damage description includes words like running at time of sinking or submerged while operating, because that engine told you what happened to it, and what happened to it is expensive. Do all of that, and a $20,000 outboard for $3,000 stops being a story you heard at the marina. It becomes something you do on a Tuesday morning in a Copart lot in Fort Lauderdale while everyone else is paying retail.